Well, hello, that's me again. Today is July 30th. It's the end of the weekend. It's Sunday, and Happy Monday is coming up. So, and let's start with a little bit of the kind of SitRep and headlines, and then we'll get into the more fundamental things which are important. But I will start with, what can I say? Evidently, with the death of Benny Hill, primarily comedy moved into the realm of the British politics and armed forces. And here we have this tabloid. Well, Britain doesn't have anything but tabloids. And they say that Ukraine commanders train in UK for Crimea invasion. And then, of course, these people who never saw real serious war, like in the last 80 years, they talk about that British troops are training an elite Ukrainian commander brigade to cripple Russian forces and recapture Crimea before Christmas, sources claim. So let me put it this way in the most simplest terms. To take Crimea, it will take several armies the size, all of them, armed forces of United Kingdom. So if they think that single brigade can capture Crimea, I have a bridge to sell to British tabloids. But then again, normal people do not go into British politics or British media. So as a result, you have those absolute idiots who just come up with this absolute garbage, and I don't even know how to describe it. It's not even funny anymore because it's complete like panopticon. So the same goes with Germany, when they're even one of German channels, so to speak, T-Online, it gets the interview with some Brigadier General Christian Früding, and evidently this Bundeswehr guy, who actually commands now, I don't know, so about what, 50 to 60,000 transgender confused people in Bundeswehr, is talking about that. Of course, the slow progress of the this Ukrainian offensive or counteroffensive is due to mines. Well, there you go. That's another profound German military thinker. But of course, you look at this, it's a comedy across the board. It just, you look at this and you have to ask the question why those people are so stupid. I mean, but I think so they are not accidental, the appearance of those clowns providing this kind of white noise. Is precisely because they need to cover up that of the complete, utter failure of the so-called counteroffensive, because as I already stated, in operational art, it's generally known that if within first 15 days of the offensive you didn't get any kind of the aims of the offensive, it's done, it's over. You can take a look and for example, Operation Citadel, which is of course resulted in the famous Kursk battle, and it started on July 5th, and by July 12th it was over. And unlike the Western Shyster so-called historians talk about that it was due to the Sicily withdrawal, it had nothing to do with, landing by the Allied troops, it had nothing to do with Sicily landing, it had everything to do with the start of the Soviet Red Army offensive actions in the south and around the Meuse front, which was called, and that was as the result they started to withdraw their primarily most capable Nordmold divisions there. So, but what can I say? Obviously, those people don't study history. They don't know what they are talking about, and that continues with the other things of the absolute garbage which is being basically provided to the Western public. But here we have this very interesting admission by USA Today, which was 2 days ago, well, 3 days ago, and some people begin to talk about Zelensky is in a box. Some experts say Ukraine won't win the war. Live updates. I don't know who those experts who thought that Ukraine can win the war, but what do I know? So, and here in this article article, we have the opinion by some Stephen Myers, an Air Force veteran who served on the State Department's Advisory Committee on International Economic Policy under two Secretaries of State. And he told USA Today that one of the West narratives is that Putin planned to conquer Ukraine and continue west if not stop. And he argues correctly that Russia wasn't really didn't want Ukraine to start with at all. But what do I know? So, and strategically, as he said, this war was lost by both sides before it started, and it will end in stalemate. And here where Stephen Myers, being the U.S. Air Force veteran, goes completely off-road and begins to talk about things he doesn't understand. First, you cannot lose war by two sides before it started. It's obviously yet another pseudo-intellectual construct which you would expect from the American Air Force guy who evidently has no idea what he's talking about, because obviously the way in the United States the victory is defined is the whole other story. But of course, if he wants to think that somehow you can lose both sides before the war and you can lose this war, I don't know, so there is a school of thought which still exists in the United States, that the United States won in Vietnam. And I'm pretty sure over the years there will be people who will be continuing to talk about that the United States also won in Afghanistan and in Iraq. But, so you can't expect anything from all those experts. But he obviously talks about what I spoke about this couple of days ago, that NATO is experiencing donor fatigue and disappointment. Zelensky bluster, another guy tells USA Today, well, donor fatigue is the cover up for the catastrophe which is unfolding for armed forces Ukraine and NATO on the front. And you can look at this even by the aggregate on for today. It is obviously the 30th, as you can see yourself, and we can take a look and see that more than 20,000 KIAs, 107 tanks, or as Mr. Putin spoke 2 days ago, I believe he told 458 tanks in all from the start of the so-called offensive in June 4th. So as you can see yourself, all kinds of vehicles, all kinds of artillery pieces. So it's just basically demolition of the Ukrainian and NATO forces there. And now we have the confirmation that basically they're in Dnipropetrovsk, which is called, Dnieper was the headquarters of the SBU, struck by the Iskander missiles. And when you look at the whole dynamics, you have news like that. Yesterday, Russian Ministry of Defense reports, and again, 25 UAVs have been attacking Crimea yesterday. 16 of them have been shot down by the air defense means, and another 9 have been suppressed by the electronic warfare means. As the result of this terrorist attack, there are no wounded or killed, and there are no any damage done to infrastructure. And this is what Sevastopol and Crimea generally has to deal with constantly, including, of course, those sleeping cells of the agents of the SBU, and there are many of them, believe me. So, but in the end, if you look attentively at how this could be judged overall and within this, outside this narrative, which is completely collapsing. I mean, only people with their IQ lower than the room temperature believe this Western mainstream media crap about the, Ukraine somehow winning, or that Ukraine has a bright future or is a democratic state. But we have a true gentleman. I'm not talking about only Judge Napolitano, who is doing absolutely stunningly beautiful and needed work in discussing things which nobody would even touch in the American media. But we, of course, talk about Mr. Alistair Crook, who is this quintessential English gentleman. This is actually how Russians always viewed the British until they kind of encountered the real Britain and its politics. But Mr. Alistair Crook is this quintessential British guy, gentle, smart, they're all positive qualities which have been always associated with the British intelligentsia and high-level politics, almost aristocratic in his outlook. And he talked to Judge Napolitano a couple of days ago, and they talk about this, that has U.S. military might become a myth. And their answer is unequivocal. Yes, it is a myth. It always was a myth. And Mr. Alistair Crook is very straightforward on that, being, though absolutely admiringly soft-spoken and intellectual in the most positive way you can express this. And he says, yeah, it is. I mean, everything have been exposed as basically complete fraud. Technology doesn't work. It's not designed for the modern battlefield against some military power as Russia. And it's not only underperforming, the word is not underperforming. The word is, and the term is that you look at this, it's just like, goodness gracious, they sell this garbage basically for the enormous money. It's a graft. It's basically a racket, and they just into this the U.S. military-industrial complex is for making money, pretty much. And here, which brings us kind of to this very important point, which I wanted to talk about today, because obviously when you listen to Mr. Putin yesterday, he says this. Putin was speaking to the many people who represented the African countries, leaders of the African countries, which we'll talk about later. Putin says that no one wants that, the war. But he stated that, yeah, we are ready for any scenario. And he said, while we definitely do not want a war with NATO, but he said, if someone wants it, and that's not us, then we are ready. And this is actually one of those bone-chilling things which, those people in NATO has had to experience when he stated this. Because when you look again at the military potential of Russia, and now not just potential, the kinetic power which Russia engaged, and she did it without any strain. And we're looking about what? We don't even know the actual number of the personnel, which is now trained and ready to jump, so to speak, into action. We're looking at what? Probably up to 1 million of the active personnel, which is ready to go and do the battle if somebody in NATO, which means Washington, D.C., decides to commit the suicide. Well, not only that, of course, we're talking about the strategy and the issue of the resources. And Russia now engaged her resources, and she outproduces basically all NATO combined in every single category of the ammunition and hardware which is required for the real serious war. And then we have this situation on the front, which everybody, you cannot fail to notice what is going on there. And when Putin was saying this, it is a warning also that Russia is ready to fight NATO. He also stated this very interesting thing, which is essentially gives the green light for Poland to take those lands, the Vostochny Kresy, Eastern Kresy, which is of course part of the Western Ukraine, which is the fact that the partition of Ukraine, which is ongoing, and Putin kind of was, while being ambivalent, he definitely wasn't against it. He stated about it as fait accompli, that Poland will introduce troops in into the Western Ukraine, and eventually Western Ukraine will become part of Poland. I don't know why Poland needs this really a pain in the butt. I mean, but you know what? It's clear that Russia doesn't want those people. They are the hotbed of the basically Ukrainian ultra-nationalism and Nazism, the Bandera worshipping land. So let Poles deal with this. But of course, that will be a very different arrangement in terms of as it relates to NATO. But we'll get there, when we get there. But for now, I want to go back, actually, after reviewing this. And this is, of course, the map of the countries. African countries, which supposedly, in accordance to lying pieces of crap which constitute majority of the US media, who says that Russia was basically isolated by Africa in the St. Petersburg Russia-Africa summit. Let me show you something. In the red, you can see yourself those countries which did not participate. You can see yourself who did not participate. The Lesotho, Kenya didn't participate in St. Petersburg, Botswana didn't participate, Niger, of course, because of the coup d'etat there, and Sierra Leone with Liberia. The rest of the Africa was there, and in the dark green, there was delegations which have been headed by the president, and in the lighter green are those delegations which have been headed by different other people, like the leading politicians or ministers of foreign affairs. So as you can see yourself, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 countries of Africa didn't appear there. The rest have been all present at this summit. You see, this is how Russia is isolated, quote unquote, and this tells you who those people and those organizations which pass for media in the United States and in the West in general. So, but here is the point. And again, I don't want to overload you with all this strategy and operations talk, but let me kind of get you back 4.5 years ago to my book, Real Revolution in Military Affairs. And let's take a look at some quotes there from what I wrote, and, let's go and take a look. Here it is. Look what I wrote already then. I spoke about those operational concepts and strategies when I stated that mere operation or even production of some precision-guided munitions, PGFs, is also not in any way an indicator of revolution. True revolution starts when all those weapon systems and sensors are integrated in such a way that their potential could be used to the full extent to achieve the objective which Clausewitz defined as compelling the enemy to do our will. Those systems only become major drivers of revolution in military affairs when several key conditions are met. Then my book goes actually to describe and list some of those conditions. Of course, in order to list all of them, it will require a huge volume, 2,000 pages. But so look what I also concluded at that time. And one of these conditions was, of course, that I already stated that all this geographic insularity is complete baloney, the myth of the secure rear. And here what I concluded was that the fact that US military in its modern history never experienced any serious fire impact on its command and control centers and rear somehow was never discussed. And evidently I was, if not the first, then at least one of the first people who started to actually bring up this idea that, it doesn't matter now how far in deep your headquarters of the brigade, division, corps or army or headquarters of the supreme commander are located. It doesn't matter. They will be detected, identified, and then annihilated with a modern standoff weapons. And then, of course, when speaking about theoretical issue of the some kind of invasion and the real serious state actors fighting each other, this is what I wrote 4.5 years ago. Any conventional war between nation states very well may degenerate into the attrition warfare. If one major power decides to invade another, it will be the people with all their knowledge, skills, will, morale, culture, and patriotism who will decide the issue against the aggressor, because the seat of the government is always on land. And as I already stated, Russia, did Russia invade Ukraine? Yes, she did. But of course, Russia was absolutely, provoked to do so, because essentially Ukraine and its NATO advisors, its NATO handlers, Washington and London, have been preparing the invasion of their own, and that's why Russia had to forestall it. And guess what? Russians evidently have better organization, better will, better desire, and better all things to conduct the attrition warfare. And that immediately projects itself to NATO ideas that it can fight Russians in Eastern Europe. It can't. It can try to invade, but it will be destroyed utterly to the point of no return, and we will be seeing not just the demolition of the NATO, combined NATO military, we will be seeing demolition of the Europe as the nation's collection of the nation states. But I'm being on record, as you can see yourself. And then a few days ago, none other than Mr. Milley, Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, doing what many American military and politicians do when they begin to retire, and doing this because of that, they suddenly have this, epiphanies, and they begin to speak about realities of the situation around the world and inside the United States. So, Mr. Milley pens the article, which is a very interesting article in many respects. It's National Defense University Press, and the magazine is Joint Force Quarterly, number 110, third quarter, July 2023. In it, Mark Milley suddenly drops the bombshell. And the bombshell is that he talks about and writes about strategic inflection point. The most historically significant and fundamental change in the character of war is happening now, while the future is clouded in mist and uncertainty. Well, I mean, I wrote about, as you saw yourself, and you are free to buy the book and read it, about this most historically significant and fundamental change in character of war more than 4.5 years ago. So, and that is why I quoted you some small parts from my book, one of my books. But Milley actually goes and begins to make some really pretty interesting conclusions. And look what he writes. He writes about the changing character of war, and obviously he kind of exposes himself as an American exceptionalist, and of course he repeats this absolutely, revisionist and ultimately untrue narrative. But speaking of World War II, he says that Germany eventually lost to overwhelming industrial might of the United States in conjunction with the Soviet Union and other allies. Well, I thought it was actually the other way around, but hey, if they teach that in West Point and the General Staff and Command College in 11th Kansas, then yeah, there's no surprise that the United States cannot win a freaking single war against the people with sandals and AK-47s, because they think that they defeated Germany. But he says we might not get 18 months to read a future or to react to a future military onslaught. No, you will not. And here he talks about that, basically. About the fact of which I always say that there is no such thing anymore as concentration of the forces the way it was done in the World War II, because unless you have really serious air defense, which the United States doesn't have and will not have for many years to come, concentrating forces, as the special military operation demonstrated, is going to be a death knell. And here it is. Here's Mr. Milley concludes. Low-cost autonomous platforms, coupled with commercial imagery and behavior tracking data augmented by the artificial intelligence and analysis tools, will accelerate the ability to sense and make sense of the environment. Inexpensive drones, loitering munitions, and precision-guided munitions with increasing speed, range, and accuracy will further reduce the time it takes to close the kill web. Robotics and additive manufacturing will change the way military supply and sustain their forces. Pervasive sensors, AI-driven weapon systems, and long-range precision fires will make the fastest platforms seem slow and leave the most hidden formations exposed. Well, he just quoted what I was talking about for many years, and actually I was talking about this for many years, and I'm talking like 9-8 years ago. And I warned about that NATO, if NATO wants to engage Russia, and that's what they wanted, because many of them are those people who have no clue what they're talking about, including those military people. And so now they can see, everything happening in front of them, and Russia uses everything what Mr. Milley lists here. And the interesting part about it is the fact that United States doesn't have it. And I just give you one example, long-range precision fires. United States is not even in the same league, and of course it doesn't have real serious supersonic, let alone hypersonic weapons, which Russia dominates the battlefield with. So, and then of course here comes to what I write about constantly. The American homeland has almost always had been a sanctuary during conflict, but this will not be the case in a future war. Why will it be the case? It's not the case. It never was the case. And Russia just celebrated their Navy Day, and guess what? Look up Russia's submarine forces. They are state of the art, and they carry weapons U.S. Navy can only dream about. And this is just cold hard fact. The United States has nothing like the modern 3M14M. It has nothing like Onyx P800, and of course it has nothing like 3M22 Zircon hypersonic missiles. What are we talking about? And I'm not talking about nuclear deterrent. Of course, any Russian submarine can launch their deterrent, or pretty much intercontinental ballistic missile anywhere from any point in the world. So, but he says, robust space and cyber capabilities allow adversaries to target critical national infrastructure. We cannot be sure that adversaries will ethically constrain emerging technologies or restrain their use of weapons of mass destruction. Well, the word ethically is the funniest stuff I read in a long time. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Milley should know that actually what the main object of the war is to compel the enemy to do our will. And the United States had no problems of burning, killing, annihilating civilians, and they were doing this evidently ethically, I would say. He better look up about this crazy witch, Madeleine Albright, who stated that killing 500,000 Iraqi children was worth it for the democracy, or whatever passes for it in the United States in the last 40 years. So, and then Milley concludes that here comes this huge thing. And guess what Milley offers when he discusses basically that what I am on the record for many years, that the whole organization of the United States Armed Forces, as well its fighting doctrine, are designed primarily to kill their 5-year-old children in the sandbox. And the whole idea of air-land battle is preposterous, because the United States never fought anything in terms of combined arms warfare, as they see today in just special military operation. Wait, God forbid, of course, if Russia rolls out Russian combined arms war, that will be a whole other thing to behold. But here it is. He offers a future-focused organization for force development and design. And look what he writes about. This organization would integrate with allies and partners from the very beginning of force design. And he described this and the leader of this future organization as, finally and most importantly, we would designate the leader of this organization as the senior advocate solely dedicated to focus on the future joint operating environment, concepts, force design, requirements, and doctrine. He or she would represent a future joint war fighter in decision forums. This leader organization would maintain a persistent focus on the fundamental evolution required for our future joint force. Well, Milley essentially says what I'm on record, you can quote me, the U.S. military organization is not designed for fight serious war. I'm not going to go into details because why the commands do not work, and they will not work in the real serious scale and scope combined arms war. But what Milley offers is essentially the copy of Russian General Staff. He lists all functions which Russian General Staff produces, and he is talking about the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff becoming the, of course, you know what, the chief of the general staff, because obviously without general staff, actually the way American military is designed and the way American services interact, it's not designed to fight serious enemies. I want to say that obviously Milley having this epiphany, you know, strategic operational epiphany, and obviously studying what Mr. Gerasimov does and how he does it together with people like Mr. Colonel General Rudskoy, the chief of the GO, Главное оперативное управление, or basically main operational planning department of Russian General Staff do. But of course we can go back even to the Prussian General Staff organization. But again, I want to point out Russian General Staff and Russian staff culture is older than the United States as a country. And this is the thing which has to be understood. By copying or being a doctrine mongers doesn't change the fact that you cannot change the initially flawed organization of how services, U.S. Armed Forces services interact and why United States lost the arms race. And that's the whole other story. I need to make several videos about it. But the fact that Milley does this in the Joint Force Quarterly to writes it, or what I believe it's actually 7 days ago. And this is like, oh my God, can you believe that? Obviously they saw it. They cannot go out. Well, at least most of them. Some of them have enough integrity and human courage and professional integrity to come out and say, we have nothing like this. We cannot even fight anything like this. Like none other than Mr. Cavoli, of course, the Supreme Commander of the NATO forces. But now we have Mark Milley saying that, oh yeah, you know what, our organization, well, basically sucks. It's not designed to fight, anything more than, well, pretty much Iraq army. And then we have, of course, the reaction immediately. One of the neocons from the two former aides to Mr. Kaspar Weinberger, pardon, Mr. Cropsey, he goes into the Hill, the publication, and he writes this. I mean, he goes completely bananas on the 24th that Mark Milley's bureaucratic proposal could lose us the next war. Really? Well, I would suggest Mr. Cropsey to remind me when was the last time America won any war. What's about next war against who? Against Russia, if the United States wants to escalate to nuclear threshold, which it will, because it will sustain catastrophic losses it never encountered its history, but sure. But other than that, look what this guy is upset with. And he's neocon's neocon, and he is obviously being neocon. He doesn't understand what real modern warfare is, and he writes some garbage, utter trash in the Hill. He doesn't even know the history, obviously. He also pretends that he knows how the Red Army fought and how the Red Army General Staff was operating. But here it is. He writes that Milley argument in the just published issue of Joint Force Quarterly demonstrates the U.S. military direction, one that undermines the power of the services and centralizes strategic operational and technological development with a pseudo-general staff. This will create a military organization incapable of adapting to future conflict and reacting to the unexpected technological change. Guys, you know what? Mr. Cropsey needs to read my blog of 9 years and my books, of which I warned that United States cannot adapt by the nature of its military history, culture, and that even introduction of some kind of the general staff will not change it, because you cannot change the culture, pardon me. You cannot change the genesis, and you cannot change the DNA, so to speak, of the armed forces, which never fought anything like this alone. What Russia does now against the combined forces, essentially, of NATO and the resources of NATO. And, well, Mark Milley actually provides some kind of the constructive approach, but Mr. Cropsey is actually panicking simply because, obviously, if he can present to me the adaptation of the U.S. armed forces to the technological change, I'm all ears and eyes. But, of course, he cannot do that because, actually, as I already on the record, the United States lost the arms race, and one of the major reasons why it lost the arms race is precisely because its organization, its worldview, the way it is educated, or miseducated rather, and the way the technological policies are promoted within this, rigid and pretty much grieved organization. They're not designed to fight and defend the United States. So they're designed to make a profit. And that's simple as that. And that's, as Mr. Alistair Crook, while speaking to Judge Napolitano, stated, we observed this whole myth crumbled. United States stays naked in the modern geopolitical environment, and that is why essentially now those pathetic losers who are trying to come up and try to redirect narrative that, oh, there could be stalemate. There is no stalemate. And everybody knows this who has any kind of brain power left. And that's what I wanted to tell you, because it is a very remarkable development, and especially the fact when you have the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff basically coming out and effectively stating that the system is a bunk, complete bunk, and it is. And I'm not talking about expeditionary warfare as such, but again, as I already stated, discussing those operational strategic issues, how it is planned, because the way Russian plans, United States has nothing on that. I mean, they cannot plan anything like this, and I'm on the record again. You can quote me, United States as a nation, as the politicos. They do not have strategic planning. They don't even know what it is. The only thing the United States and the United States Armed Forces and their political top have been able to provide was a business plan. As Mr. Rogers, Alexander Rogers, one of my acquaintances, talks about. So, this is what I wanted to tell you today, and I could have gone for a much longer time on that, but I think that I thought that you need to know about this, and this is my story for you for today, guys. Have the, as always, as those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel. Those who can afford, please support me on Patreon and buy me a coffee and two, and have a nice rest of the weekend for you today, guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.